G'day friends, family, fellow patriots. Lord Stompy here in Adelaide, South Australia. Welcome. Now, before we start, I would just like to say it's 4 o'clock in the morning here. And I've been up since 3 o'clock. For some reason, I cannot sleep. I don't know why. So I thought, stuff it. I'm going to get up and make a video. So hopefully I'm not too tired and brain dead to make a decent video. So here we go. Now guys, there's something I've been talking about for quite a while. Something very, very crucially important to the European nationalist movement. And that is our fundamental lack of European unity across our entire movement. This is a huge problem at this point in time. Now, white nationalism is on the rise, and that's a healthy and positive thing. I'm quite happy about that fact. I've said before, I got into this movement 10 years ago, and I was basically a lone voice here in my city. And it was a tough slog for me all those early years because I felt like I was talking to nobody. It wasn't till about 4 years in that I actually began getting people here on the streets of my hometown. A very small number of people were coming up and people I didn't know were coming up and saying, "Oh, thanks for putting out the videos." So in my own way, I'm quite happy that I've been a leader of white nationalism in my local area, and that I've provided some kind of point for my local nationalists to rally around. Now, it's obvious that white people need to have some fundamental unity in the nationalist scene. And what I mean by that is a kind of unity, some base level of unity across the world. Right. And we don't all need to completely agree with each other. And we don't all need to be 100% part of each other's movements. But the problem is, at this point in time, we've got neo-pagans, we've got atheists, we've got Christians, we've got all these different aspects to our movement. And essentially, white nationalists, at this point in time, we're still quite a small movement. We're still a very small percentage of the population. Now, I've been talking to the old school Australian nationalist, Jack Van Tongeren, who was the leader of the nationalist movement in the 80s. And he summed up the nationalist movement problem really well. He said being a leader of the nationalist movement in the 80s, he said, I had to be really good at holding together a small group of very, very independent-minded men. And this is basically still true now. To really get into nationalism in a public way, in the kind of way I'm doing, and certain other people around me now are doing here in Adelaide, means that you've got to be completely dedicated. You've got to be on the front line. You are going to get a lot of criticism and abuse in public. So it means mainly alpha males with very, very strong personalities, and therefore with a very, very strong personal mindset. They're the main people at this point in time that are going to be attracted to this movement. basically we're still an outsider movement. And when you're an outsider movement, the general public will shy away from jumping in, boots and all. And this is for obvious reasons. Outsider movements, especially outsider movements such as nationalism, which have a very bad public perception in general. If you jump in boots and all, you're going to get a lot of criticism. You're going to get a lot of public pushback, right? So that is why only that at this point in time, we're mainly getting men with a large set of balls jumping headfirst into this movement. And essentially, the men jumping on board are most of them are what I would call lone soldiers. And that's essentially what I am. Basically, I've realised getting into this movement and essentially joining a Christian nationalist camp is I've been a kind of lone wolf all my life, and essentially this has been the case for a long time. If you look at nationalism across the board, essentially it is a very masculine movement, and essentially it has to be. Nationalism is about very strong men defending and protecting their people and being the upholders of their values. It's about strong men being on the front line at all times. So if you look at certain great nationalist leaders, the main two that come to mind off my head are Hitler and Franco, but certainly very many other nationalist leaders too. Another one, for example, is Leon de Grelle, who, was a great European nationalist leader. So all these great nationalist leaders were essentially lone wolf men, and they made their mark and became leaders with displays of incredible public fortitude. And essentially, for any kind of nationalism to work, we need men like this to be the leaders of nationalism. And we need nationalism to essentially form itself around these kind of men, because these kind of men are the men of unshakable iron will. And these are men that can hold entire nations together through the brute force of their iron will and their personality. So the problem with nationalism is it attracts all these lone soldiers, all these lone wolf kind of men. And as my friend Jack Van Tongeren said, you need to have an incredible force of will and personality as a leader to be able to hold these men together, because they've all got very, very independent personalities, and they're all very, very sure of their own particular world views. So the problem we have with nationalism now is there's no clear leaders emerging. There's leaders here and there all around the place, but essentially, with some of our leaders are neo-pagans, some are Christians, some are atheists, and the differences of personality between all these strong-willed men at this point in time, they tend not to compromise too much, and that actually is an essential component of nationalism. Very strong-willed men who don't like to compromise. Unfortunately, that's a big part of the nationalist equation. I've always been quite strong-willed, but I've been somewhat more flexible than most leaders of nationalism. I'm somewhat adaptable and flexible, and I'm adaptable and flexible for pragmatic reasons, essentially. So when it comes to nationalism, I'm more of a big tent guy, is the word you'd use. I really want to include more people in my movement rather than exclude people, because I'm very strong-willed and very particular about what I want. So that's my personal viewpoint on this matter. Now, here in Western history, in our European history, we're at a very, very low point in our European history. Now, I did a few videos where I said, basically I outlined my view, my personal view, that modern liberalism that we're in now is the new Dark Ages, right? So essentially the Dark Ages were seen as the ages immediately after the fall of the Roman Empire, when essentially due to the destruction of the Roman Empire as an empirical force that basically enforced its will across all of Europe, and the Roman Empire held all of Europe under a centralized Roman system. Okay, so after that fell, basically most of Europe had been under the Roman Empire for very many generations. So Europe had been held together under a centralized Roman system, and that the centralized Roman system was the core narrative of Europe. And the core narrative of all the smaller groups of people, the Gauls, the Celts, the Visigoths, etc., were all secondary to the Roman core narrative, right? And this is where I'm going with my talk. I want to talk about the core narrative of a people. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, whether you're Chinese, whether you're Celtic, whether you're whatever, right? The core narrative of a people is essentially what defines them. This is the core narrative that we cling to as a people. Essentially, that affects our worldview. It basically is how we think about ourselves and about the world. And so therefore our core narrative is the thinking, and it is the narrative that drives all of our decision making, all of the way that we interpret the world and the way we see ourselves. So here in this modern time, under liberalism, under modern liberalism, in the last 100-year reign of modern liberalism over the European people worldwide, essentially our traditional European core narratives have been really rapidly destroyed. And this is really easy to prove. It's very easy to see once I point this out to you. So if you go back to before World War One, okay, and you look at an Ulster Scot from Belfast, and that Ulster Scot from Belfast in 1913, there was no way that that guy could be anything in his lifetime other than an Ulster Scot from Belfast. Okay? And if you went to Kilkenny and grabbed an Irish Catholic from Kilkenny, okay, there was no way that that Irish Catholic guy could be anything other than an Irish Catholic. Now, there's been a huge range of complex factors in the last 100 years that have arisen that have completely eroded and destroyed our European core narrative. So those factors have been the ease of global travel, modern technology, modern broadcasting technology, radio, TV, and now the internet. So we've had all this technology essentially bombarding us for generations now with all these new ideas, these images, and of course the ease of global travel means that it's really easy for us to get to visit anywhere we want in the world and be affected by all these different cultures, etc., etc. And on top of that, of course, we've got the Jewish factor. So, 100 years ago, Jews such as Sigmund Freud, psychology, mass psychology, Edward Bernays, mass marketing and mass advertising. So we had this fifth column as well, the Jews, who once the modern world really began kicking in with these new technologies, they literally saw a very, very big opportunity the Jews saw this opportunity where they could use the mass communication systems and mass media to start really attacking the traditional European core narrative. And these Jews were really, really good at their job, like right off the block, right off the starting block. They went straight in. And Jews like Freud and Edward Bernays didn't even really hide this fact. They actually kind of reveled in the fact that they were creating a new kind of modern man, and this was the modern liberal man. So that was the liberal project. A big part of it was to destroy the traditional European narrative. Now, if we go back to our Ulster Scot in Belfast in 1913 and our Catholic in Kilkenny, our Irish Catholic in Kilkenny in 1913, these guys lived over 100 years. If you took some modern Karen woman who had green hair, right? If you just grabbed an Irish woman, except she's a modern one, she's got green hair, she's into yoga, she's a Hindu, and she's married to a Pajit, and you introduced her into Ireland in 1913 and got her to meet these traditionalist Irish people, they would have no clue of how to even deal with such a person. This modern liberalism has created an abomination. Over a number of generations, it has destroyed the European core narrative to the point where we don't even know who we are. So this is why we have this is a fundamental reason why we have such a massive amount of disunity among the European people. And we actually have to start almost from scratch again, rebuilding our European core narrative. And we've got to do it around something that's going to be really healthy and empowering and strengthening to the European people. So our first step is to admit to ourselves as Europeans that essentially all of our traditional European core narrative, our European soul, has been systematically destroyed over 100 years, and that we ourselves, our modern personas, our modern identity, this is a product of the mass destruction of the European people. And this is a core problem that we all have to face up to as Europeans. We have to really admit to ourselves. This is kind of like being an alcoholic. The first step is to actually admit that we're all kind of basically being, our whole identities, our core identities have been to a large degree destroyed by modern liberalism. And the second part is how do we rebuild some kind of a traditional European identity? And it starts with ourselves, actually. This is a big reason I'm becoming a very fanatical Orthodox Christian. That's is part of me rebuilding my own European traditionalist identity. So we really have to start looking in these kind of directions and applying these lessons to our